Welcome to a Life Creative Podcast. I'm Marcy McGoldrick.
And I'm Melano Gomez. This is a podcast where we share stories, support, and advice for the creative community while they navigate their professional careers.
So whether you're running a business, pursuing a passion, or just trying to connect with creators, we're here to bring you practical tips, insights from experts, and a little inspiration too.
Today's guest is someone I'm so thrilled to introduce, someone I've known since art school at the Philadelphia College of Art, my friend Raylene Marasco. Raylene actually started in graphic design, but after a few professors steered her towards textiles, she found her real path. After school, she made her way to New York City, where an opportunity arose to work for an artist on a piece that's still on display at the New York City Court Hall. From there, Raylene started dyeing costumes for Broadway shows like Phantom of the Opera and Siegfried and Roy, often teaching herself through trial and error. In 1991, she founded her own studio known for combining the techniques of hand dyeing, painting, and silk screening, incorporating digital printing technology. Her studio creates textiles for major designers, fine artists, films, Broadway, the Met, and the MoMA. What makes Raylene's work so special is that she brings an artistic sensitivity, a deep collaboration, and a passion for innovation. She's helped redefine what's possible in textile design, and she's still doing it today. I'm excited to have her on the show.
Raylene, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us today. We're
My
super
pleasure.
excited to have you. So we both grew up in Pennsylvania. You grew up in Wyomissing?
Yes.
Yes. And then how did you start to kind of notice that you were a creative person?
Well, I think I was always creative, and my mother really fostered us being artistic. My mother was really creative, and we were always in art classes growing up, and we weren't really graceful young ladies, my sister and I. So
No ballet?
yeah, we weren't in ballet. So
During high school, were you in art classes then as well?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't think so.
But then what made you decide to go, as everyone knows, that we went to the same art school, Philadelphia College of Art, together. What made you want to go there?
I applied at different schools, and I liked the idea of being in Philadelphia and being close to home. And
I was the same.
yeah,
I was almost afraid. I got accepted to other schools, and I don't know, I just wasn't in that mindset. I just want to be close to home.
yeah, and I liked that Philadelphia was a city, but it was, it was close enough, but far enough away.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just seemed like the right choice.
And then you took what did you want to major in?
Graphic design.
You did.
Well, also my sister went to Carnegie Mellon and she studied graphic design.
Okay.
So I thought, it was something that I knew. And I thought, oh yeah, I want to be a graphic designer, like my sister. And
Career by association.
right, career
Yeah.
by association. And also I thought, oh, that seemed interesting and it seemed career driven. And so I took the elective.
You did.
I did.
After foundation year. And foundation year, so everyone knows, is the first year of art school where you get a little bit of everything, and then sophomore you kind of have to choose.
Right.
Right.
So you could take these elective classes, and I recall the graphic design teacher who was Swiss French or something. He had this incredibly unusual accent, and he looked at my work and just said no.
Was it too figural? Was it too...
No, it was too messy, was
Okay.
what he said.
this isn't conforming to the Bauhaus.
Right? He said that I had an incredible color sense, but when we did all the color studies, but he said that, and back then it was paste up, it was not computer based.
Yeah.
He just felt like it was not for me.
So you were more of like a loose artist type,
Yes,
as
he was
opposed to more
very
regimented.
clear. He
Got
was
it.
very clear that it was not the path for me. I was also taking a silkscreen elective.
Okay.
And that was really freeing and super exciting to me. So
Very process driven.
very processed, and I'm to this day very process driven.
Okay.
Even when I bake, I love mixing the cookie dough,
The chemistry.
and I refuse to bake. I don't like the baking part. I like
Okay.
to mix everything and then I'm done. I'm bored. I don't want to bake. Yeah.
So then you ended up studying textiles?
I did. I studied in the fibers department.
Okay. So what kind of classes did that entail? Was it?
So it was weaving, it was silk screening, It was, I have to say that it was really geared towards a sculptural approach to fibers.
Okay.
Like fine art.
Fine art.
Okay.
It was not a textile program in the way that you might be thinking
For
textiles.
industry.
Or
It was
commercial.
not industry based at all.
And you were kind of looking for something that was a bit more practical in terms of...
I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a practical thinker.
Okay.
I'm process oriented, and I'm practical.
Was it the whole, what am I going to do out of
Yes.
art?
What am I doing for a job?
Right? Yeah.
And I think that was, my parents' influence as well.
Yes.
They were thinking, what are you going to do? What kind of job are you going to get when you're done with school? So I think that it was their pressure too of what are you going to do with this degree?
Yeah. So then after school, you decided, that's in your head. You're like, I need to get a job. I need to live. You decided to go to New York City.
Yes,
Okay. And then you just moved up there without a job.
I did.
You did.
Yes, as you do when you're 21 years old. And, I got a job at a gallery.
Okay.
And so I was working at a gallery, and I got an opportunity to work for an artist doing an artwork.
Like an installation.
It was an artwork that was down by the courthouses.
Yeah.
So
This was a very 90s thing, FYI. Like we had a lot of friends who would get hired
As artist assistants.
as artist assistants. I had a friend who all he did was glue Cheetos into a room of furniture for a month and then got paid for it. He didn't know what it really was for. But
it was cheap labor.
it was cheap labor. Yeah.
You're a starving art student that just
Yeah.
graduated. You had no job. And you would get these opportunities to
And just
work
say
for
yes.
artists. And it was a thrill to have the opportunity.
You don't always understand what's possible in terms of a career.
Yeah.
So it is a great opportunity to kind of see what that job would be like, and if you parlayed it
Or
into-
learning on a job,
Yeah, exactly.
basically, by just
or
saying
skills
yes.
in general, or all that sort of
Well,
stuff.
in school, that was the focus. Oh,
Right.
you're going to get these commissions. You're going to be able to work as an artist doing these kind of commissions. So to even be adjacent to that
Right.
was a great opportunity.
So it's sort of an internship. It's kind of an internship
Well,
in a way, but
you got paid.
You
but
got paid.
I
Not much.
can't even imagine what
Yeah.
I was paid.
Where was the installation at?
So it's still there.
Okay, in the city.
In the city. It's down by the courthouses between the holding cells and the courthouse. Which is ironically...
So you're there all the time.
It's there all the time. It's like 3 blocks from my current studio. And whenever I go to jury duty, I'm forced to...
Whenever I see my probation officer,
to see it.
I see it.
Exactly. So, it's currently at Rikers Island, actually.
Oh, my God.
Because they've taken it down to renovate.
What is it of?
It's these brick columns made
Okay.
of steel.
Okay.
So I sewed steel bricks together with wire.
Oh my gosh.
It was
Did you wear
incredibly
gloves?
painful, and I did wear gloves, although I recall that my hands would bleed. But I was thrilled to do it.
And this same artist had another
Had
commission.
another installation and work in Italy, and had an apartment in Trastevere. And
he said, "Oh, go get the girl with the bloody hands. I think
Yeah,
I think she'd be good
She'd be
for
great.
this Rome
Wouldn't
installation.
complain that much.
You suffered.
Anything for the art.
You
Yeah.
suffered through that. Would you work on some artwork in Trastevere for me? And I jumped at the chance. Worked on that. Also babysat a house of a friend of hers in Florence, and was there for a period of time, and then came back to New York. And got my second career job through the Village Voice.
Oh my gosh!
And worked as a dyer at a
The ad
costume
actually
shop.
said, "Dyer needed."
I think it did.
You were dying for a job.
I was dying for a job.
I was dying to eat.
Yeah. So, it said a dyer at a costume shop. And I thought, great. I mean, I think it was the only job that I was remotely qualified for.
And what did the costume shop? What did they do? What kind of costume?
They were really the premier costume shop for Broadway shows.
Okay. And you said you had to do a test.
Yes. So for the interview, you had to do a dye test. Now, I have adopted this form of interview to this day. So when anyone comes in for an interview as a dyer, I make them do a dye test, which is actually kind of a great way to understand it. Do they have the skill to do the job? Yeah. Because honestly, how do you really know?
Are they sort of surprised when?
No, I always tell them. I always tell them that this is something that they have to do.
And what was the test?
In my case, I had to dye a piece of cotton rope that turned out to be a tail for cats on Broadway.
Wow.
And it was actually used too, right?
It was going to be used because they had not had a dyer for a period of time and they needed someone to dye a tail for one of the cats on Broadway. So I guess they figured, well, you might as well kill two birds with one stone, I guess.
And while you were there, you were working on major productions, like
Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, huge shows.
And you basically taught yourself how to dye in that
pretty much
on the job,
because
right?
They did not do a lot of natural fiber dyeing. It was all stretch fabrics. I mean, it's Broadway, you know, and so. I had learned only to do natural fiber dyeing at school.
Is it a chemical, a big chemical difference between
huge
a plastic dyeing and?
Well, stretch fabrics are dyed in just different dyes.
Oh,
so. Which I knew nothing about.
It's not oil-based dyes, or it's...
No. It's just a different kind of dye.
Oh, okay.
So dispersed dyes or acid dyes, and I was using fiber-reactive dyes, which were for all natural fibers. So
and you have to Siegfried and Roy. You worked on this.
Siegfried and Roy was the first production that I worked at this costume shop, which was a complete surprise to me, and I had no idea who they were, and I realized that there was not a natural fiber in sight. No. So I literally just pulled every can of dye off the shelf until something worked on the stretch fabrics that they gave me to dye. Because I literally had no idea.
Would you do swatch tests and things like that first? And
yes, thank God they I had something to test on because I had literally no idea what I was doing.
You're like, does this unitard, do you have any extra fabric for this sequins unitard?
That's really how, that's how it was. And then I would go home and I would study and learn, just what dyed spandex because I had no idea. What was really, I think, what saved me is my color sense. So I was able to see color.
Okay.
Right.
Thank God.
And then were there any points where you're like, you learned what wasn't possible and what was possible?
God.
Like
I think 90% of it wasn't possible. So everything would just rinse out, So, and what also I had to realize was it had to last 8 shows a week.
Right. The sweat.
And it's not like, it just had to dye it. It had to dye it. It had to dye it the right color. And it had to last 8 shows a week.
Right.
Phantom of the Opera, these costumes are incredibly, they were so elaborate. I would ombre dye ribbon that was re-embroidered on these incredibly elaborate skirts.
Wow.
And then that was under a coat that was worn for 3 minutes on a scaffolding that she walked across the stage in the dark. And you're like, I can't.
If you're willing to pay me.
This is incredibly intricate and elaborate. But what I realized upon seeing the show is that opulence just added to the show that you saw in the end. It's if you started to eliminate each of those elements, you started to water down the look of the show. And the masquerade scene of Phantom of the Opera, there is not a detail that's lost. Everything, the curtain goes up and you're just like, it's a feast for the eyes.
Right.
So it's still to this day when I think about the shows that I've worked on Broadway, there's nothing that comes close to sort of the opulence of Phantom of the Opera.
Right. Yeah. So you were on staff there at the costume shop?
Yes.
What was the pay like early on?
Oh my gosh. When I left my job there, I was making $6.50 an hour. But, you know, this was a long time ago.
Yeah. Did you stay long?
Oh my God.
At that?
I mean, there was a guy that would come in and clean the costume shop, and his name was Bruce. And when you saw Bruce, I think he came in at like 3 a.m. And when you saw Bruce, you knew that it was like the point of no return. And there were only a few times that I saw Bruce, but I did see him.
But then you decided to leave.
I did.
You were done.
Well, the opportunity, you know, came up that there was a studio available. I was also receiving freelance opportunities.
For dyeing?
For dyeing,
Okay.
for painting,
Okay.
for doing other types of services
Okay.
that really excited me.
How did you figure out rates back then? Like, did you just sort of project-based kind of like, I'll do it
you know,
for
and on movies, you made a lot more money.
Right.
I had the opportunity, and they would say, "Oh, we're going to pay you this," and I'd say, "Great." You know, it was more than $6.50 an hour, so anything was great.
Yeah.
What was your first film?
I think the first film was maybe Light Sleeper.
Okay.
And that was with someone who used to be a dyer.
Okay.
And at the costume shops, Richard Horning, who received an Oscar for Barton Fink.
That's great.
And worked a lot with the Coen brothers. And this was an amazing opportunity. He had me dye garments for Armani for that film. And that actually had Armani contacting me directly and said...
But wait, the clothing was already made. They wanted a different color.
Yes.
And you had to dye it where?
Well, they gave me... So what happened was Armani donated garments for the film.
Okay.
And they said, so Richard said, we want the palette changed. And also in the film, Dana Delaney and Susan Sarandon, Willem Dafoe, it was a really small film, but there were these amazing people in it. And one of the characters was a person who did colors for people, you know, which is such a like an 80s
color
thing.
Me winter.
Yeah, like, you know, I will do your colors.
With the swatches on
right.
them.
And so I did this palette of colors on silk, and that was really fun, and I got to choose whatever colors I wanted. And so this palette of colors hung in this apartment. I guess then from that palette of colors, it turned into dyeing Armani's clothes to some of those palettes.
Okay.
And
I guess this is also early on for Armani, right? He had done American Gigolo, right?
It was sort of his people. It's not like he called me, you know?
Yeah.
And they said, we really loved what you had done. And, you know, we need some things dyed in New York. And would you do it? And sure, why not? So it wasn't that unusual to get a request to dye things. So I was happy to do that.
And was that would you say that's kind of the beginning of Dyenamix, the beginning of your business, when that kind of started, when you started doing the freelance and then started taking on these extra projects? Or?
Well, I realized that there was a market.
Okay.
And I also realized that I had interest in doing something other than dyeing. And I wanted the freedom to take on some other types of projects.
Okay.
I wanted to be able to do some hand painting. I wanted to be able to do some silk screening.
Where was that design studio?
At the time, when I was working on these films, I was working out of their spaces. It was a
Okay.
warehouse, and I was working, literally I was dyeing in a sink, in a bathroom, in a warehouse. You know, so I was working on site, and I realized pretty quickly that was unrealistic. You know, I was boiling pots of water on a hot plate and pouring them into like a Tupperware in a warehouse on 11th Avenue for the film.
Yeah.
It was really unrealistic to work that way. My relationship at the time, Stuart Verley, shout out to Stuart for helping me start my business back then. He said, I have a friend who has a studio and a space in Hoboken. It's incredibly inexpensive.
Our mutual friend.
Yeah. And he said, look, I can help build it out for you and you'll have a space to work out of. And that gave me the confidence to start my business.
What do you actually need? You need washers. You need
Yeah,
tubs,
you need a
sink.
place to dye. I needed a big table to silk screen and to hand paint on. You know, people assume it's about all this equipment.
Yeah.
It's not. You know, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
I don't think it has to be. I think it's about your creativity, and I think it's about being super resourceful. You know, I don't think it's necessarily, the equipment doesn't do the work. You do.
Yeah.
Right. It just makes it easier sometimes.
Yeah. With digital printing now, the machine does the work.
You need it.
But, you know, people say, oh, well, what separates what your work is on the digital printer from what someone else does? And it's like, well, it's about the artwork.
Taste level?
I mean, it's about so many other things. It's
Yeah.
not about the machine.
Do you like teaching someone how to do something?
I do, because I think that from my own experience, I think if you can see color, you can be taught process. And
That's interesting.
I think that if you want to learn and you have the aptitude to learn and you're excited about it, I think that anyone can learn some of the skills that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were saying you kind of would be given new opportunities, like a hand painted job in fashion, like you said, a project with Ralph Lauren that you worked on.
So soon after, I didn't stay in Hoboken very long.
Okay.
I moved to Mercer Street, multiplied the rent 5 times.
Were you panicked?
Yes, I was panicked, but I knew that it was a good move to move into the city and get more opportunities. I was still doing a lot of theater and film early on, and you know, they say that expression from the film, that Kevin Costner film, the baseball movie. I don't know.
Field of
If you
Dreams.
build it, they will come.
Yeah, build it, they will come, you know? And I literally walked around saying like...
Boil a pot, I'm dying.
Yeah, exactly.
If you boil
I
it.
really felt like I was walking around saying like, I want to do fashion, you know? I want to do fashion. And literally it just sort of came to me.
Now we call that manifesting.
Exactly. Now
Inspiration
it's called,
board.
Right, it's called men. Yeah, but you know, so you know, I'm dating myself by saying Field of Dreams or you know whatever. Maybe I didn't want to give the plug to Field of Dreams, but
What did you do for Ralph Lauren?
we did hand painting of samples and production for many years.
How many pieces are in a production?
It can be hundreds to, like, I think we did 1,100 pieces was the largest we ever did.
And so were they hand painted finished garments, or would you be painting the fabric before?
It was pattern pieces that were then put together.
Okay.
It was hand painted original artwork. We scanned it. We digitally printed the pattern pieces in sizes, graded in sizes.
Oh.
So that they were
cool.
partially hand painted and partially digitally printed. I love the idea of problem solving the project. I love the idea of sort of figuring it all out, the ins and outs of working with the production team. So what's great about Dyenamix, I think, is that we work with the design team. Mm-hmm. So we start with the design team. And they have these sort of idyllic ideas of starting with this crazy idea. You know, I'm talking about fashion.
But
right?
they give inspiration. Like sometimes
They're coming with this amazing inspiration.
And unlike some designers who'd come with a piece of sea glass and then say, I need a line with, I need something made out of this.
I love that too. You know, I mean, I love that approach too. You know, I love when someone comes with something super abstract and they expect me to sort of come up with something from that. I relish in that kind of approach as well. But when the design team comes and they have this really ludicrous idea, I'm always the person that says, how are we doing this in production?
Right.
And they don't like when I do that. But I am the one who has to fight with production when production comes back to me and says, how are we doing this?
Right. And your production as well, which is somewhat unique too,
We can
right?
be.
Yeah, okay.
We can be. We're not always.
Okay.
But, you know, for runway, we often are. Or we're often the first plan of action for the production team.
Okay.
Because there might be, you know, for runway, there might be 60 pieces, 50 pieces. And they're so specialized that they can't be replicated in a factory setting. So they're coming to us first. And they're saying, can we do this in production? And sometimes it is so labor intensive or it's so difficult to replicate in production that I'm always with the design team, I'm already thinking 3 steps ahead because I know production is coming back to us. I try, when we develop samples in the studio, I'm already thinking about production.
You've sort of mastered this idea of wearable production techniques. You know, someone can come to you from start to finish with the idea and then the production and then, well, the idea, the design, and then the production. At some points, do you say, no, I'm not producing that? Do you say that has to be handed over, that it's too crazy? Or do you relish in taking it all on from start to finish like that?
I will tell someone at the get-go, we can only do 50 pieces.
Okay, so a small batch production.
Yes,
Okay.
I will be very clear at the beginning that we could only do X amount of this. So let's make this a very bespoke, limited production, exclusive type of production. Or let me produce you a sample that can be produced overseas. Right. Or by another factory, and I can provide you instructions on how to do that. Let me produce a sample that can be replicated.
Right.
I've done that as well. When I know that their price point or their demographic has to be done a different way.
Yeah.
So I can provide that. You know, we work for so many different industries. So I think knowing that I have to replicate things for the theater, you know, in multiples, right. You know, Radio City, there's not one Rockette. You know, there's a whole slew of them. So you have to be able to make one for everyone, you know. So I know how to replicate things, and that helps me in fashion when replicating. But, you know, we work for interiors. We work for the theater and film and television. You know, when we do something for the film industry, there's stunt doubles. There's not just one of those. There's 30 of them. And if I paint something that is distressed, I have to paint every single one to look exactly like that one. Because the stunt double looks exactly like the actor. If that garment is distressed and there's a mark on the sleeve, every mark on that sleeve has to be exactly the same.
How do you price it all?
There's samples,
okay.
You know, so there's development, okay. And that's priced one way,
okay.
And then there's production.
Right.
So our pricing is the same for everyone. You know, people say like, oh, well, we're, you know, a small company. It's like...
So am I.
Yeah,
me too.
You know, exactly. So am I, you know. And I don't think that it would be fair to say, oh, well, if you can afford it, you're paying this. And if you can't afford it, you're paying that.
Right.
I have based our pricing on real time. And the pricing is based on... the people that work for me, they're being paid a fair wage. Yep. They get benefits and things that are fair to my employees with the skills that they have.
Could you talk a little bit about the people that you are hiring? And, you know, if someone's listening and they have this interest in this, what are you looking for in a candidate? You know?
Well, I say that I love a person who knows a little about a lot.
A jack of all trades? Are we raising our hand?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like, I think that, you know, like myself, it's somebody who's a problem solver. So it's somebody who can draw on experiences that they've had. And because our projects, like I said, are so diverse. You know, an artist comes in and they say they have an idea that they're conceptualizing a project, and you have to be able to draw on some project that you've done that is an artwork that is different than drawing on a project that's a fashion project or that's an interior project, or, you know, so
you're like, that reminds me of this holding cell that I did an installation with when I first moved to New York.
Holding cell. But, you know, it's like, well, that was working in steel. So it's like, well, what did I learn from that? Or how was that artwork hung in that museum, and how did we do that, and how do we solve that problem, or how was that costume solved?
Yeah.
You know, how did we solve the problem of gilding something and that was being washed 8 shows a week, and how did the gold hold up for that on that material versus this or that?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's really drawing on a lot of different experiences. So, oh, did we use silicone, you know, on that material? And that, so it's drawing on all of these different experiences.
So you had a studio on Mercer Street, and then you eventually relocated to Tribeca?
Well, we were at Mercer Street for 10 years. Then we went to Grand and Lafayette, also in Soho. And now we're in Tribeca.
And then that's a historical building, you said?
Yes, it's Matthew Brady, the famous Civil War photographer.
Wow.
It was his studio. So there's amazing photographs of that building and like very Gangs of New York with like horse and buggies and, you know, and just that building. So rumor has it that Abraham Lincoln was photographed in the building. So
Spooky? Is it spooky?
Well, they say it's haunted, but I've never had the lights flicker. Abe has never visited me in the middle of the night there. I'm usually the only one there in the building.
Whose 10-gallon hat is this?
Exactly. Yeah, but I've never had anything spooky happen to me in the middle of the night there.
So you adopted digital printing fairly early into your business.
Yes, so we were really early pioneers in digital printing direct onto fabric.
How did
or
that
natural
happen?
fibers.
And what year was that, you think?
1999.
Okay.
There was sublimation, which was on synthetics, but direct digital printing onto textiles was unusual for that time period.
Explain sublimation.
Sublimation is where you print paper and it's transferred onto fabric.
So like for people, it's a laser printer transfer.
Well, Gautier did it
Okay.
really early on those mesh shirts,
Yeah.
you know, so that was around
You had one of
already.
those, right?
I did.
Yeah,
Su-
I mean, I think
very
you know,
subtle.
Yes. So
Word
those-
to that kennel club that we loved in Philadelphia.
Yeah, in the 80s.
In the 80s.
Right. So those were around and that technique was around, but digitally printing direct onto natural fibers was not really around. And they were developing a printer for that in Japan. And I was looking at those printers at trade shows and just sort of poking around. They were very expensive at the time, and it was really new technology.
And what's expensive? Just curious.
I mean, I think at the time they were like 30 grand, 40 grand, but that was not including
Inks or
dyes or that was not including any software for the printers.
And this is printing directly on fabric.
Printing directly onto fabric.
Wow.
So imagine a giant plotter or a giant inkjet printer with dye. So it's not ink, it was dye. And, you know, being a dyer and being a silkscreen printer, printing with dye, it was a pretty easy transition intellectually for me. You know, there were studios that were printing on paper, but they were not printing textiles. You know, I was dyeing and I was printing textiles by silkscreen with dye. So I was already finishing the fabrics. I already knew the chemistry, right? And I was hand painting with dyes. So for me, it was a rather easy transition, but I couldn't make the financial commitment.
Is this like a 54-inch bolt of fabric that gets fed in?
60-inch.
60 inch.
60-inch at the time.
And does it have to be backed and everything?
It at
to
the
go through
time,
printer?
it did. It needed to be backed.
What do you mean backed? Like with paper?
On paper,
Oh.
like, it almost like kind of basted onto paper so it would go through the printer.
Right. But
And
again,
drying time? Since they were dyes, there's a drying time once it spits out?
It had to be steam set. Oh. So when it was printed, it wasn't set. You know, so it was just printed onto the fabric, much like, you know, again, it was the same way I was silkscreen printing. So I would print it with dye, and then I would have to set the color by steaming it. So that would develop the color and it would set the color. And then you would wash it after to wash out any residual dye. Think of the digital printing as almost airbrushing the color on, right? Because it's so fine and you get super fine detail. And the pre-treatment stops the capillary action of the fiber. You know, when you put a droplet of water on a paper towel, it bleeds, right? But with the pre-treatment, you put a droplet of dye on, it just sticks exactly where it is. So you get super fine detail. I, of course, already had all this equipment because I was silk screening this way, I was hand painting this way. It was very easy for me to transition. But I did not have the printer. So I was looking at it, and I was then contacted by the company that was making these Japanese machines, and they said, hey, we'd love to give you a machine. And I thought, fantastic. They said, we would love you to do a trade show. We would love you to we would love the fabric to be on a runway, any runway. They didn't specify a major runway. And we would like it to be in a theatrical setting. We would like to give you the machine for 6 months. So I thought, well, I would love to try it out. That sounds great. The machine showed up at 8 p.m. on a weeknight with just a guy on a truck. I mean, he was literally a delivery guy. In my mind, when this machine was going to be delivered, I imagined, Yeah,
like when you have a Canon machine in an office, someone delivers, someone sets it up and puts the inks in. Right.
I imagine this fanfare of, a person from Japan, with, setting it up, training me, this whole thing. No. And I thought, how am I getting it inside? How am I getting it upstairs? There's 4 steps to the studio, and we did have an elevator, but I just didn't expect that.
Yeah.
What I also realized is the trade show was 3 weeks later. And there was no one coming to train me to run the machine ever. I mean, not that they weren't coming later. They were never coming. I did the trade show. I set up this sort of conceptual booth of being, an artist of like all the things that this machine could do. Anyway, we did the trade show. Was
a rep there? Was someone?
No.
So they didn't even send anybody for the trade show.
No, I was the rep.
Okay.
And you're like, hi, I'm representing this.
I'm representing what the machine can do.
And they're like, are you from Japan?
No, I'm representing the machine. I'm representing what it can do in the 3 weeks that I've had it. This is, what I know it can do. We had all these samples that we had created of all these designs that we printed in 3 weeks. I mean, we learned a ton in 3 weeks on what the machine could do. As a result, we had fabric down Donna Karen's runway within months.
So they came into the booth and said, we want you to do fabric for us.
No, we were already working for Donna Karen.
Okay.
And
you were doing yardage?
We were doing work already for Donna Karen. And I think we were hand painting, and I said, oh, why don't we digitally print that? And we managed to pull that off for her runway that season. And we had it on a Broadway stage. Within the first 3 months, we had delivered everything that we were asked to do. Ultimately, we had 3 of those machines.
3?
3. I ran those until recently, and I recently donated those 3 to Pratt. So we ran those for 20 years.
Wow. And so what is the printer that you have now?
3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when I donated those 3 to Pratt, and they still were running amazingly well. Bottom line is, when we donated those, I got a grant through the CFDA to get 2 brand new machines. So I have 2 brand new machines that we now run that replace the 3 that we donated to Pratt.
And
Is
how
it
fast?
Any smaller?
Yeah.
They are not smaller.
No?
They are bigger. And when we moved them in, I had the same moving company. And some of the guys, we moved the 3 out and moved the 2 new ones in. And some of the same guys were the movers. And they're like, you got 2 bigger ones? They were very unhappy with me that day. But they did move them. And we have the 2 new ones in the shop.
How many ateliers do you think are using these things now?
Not
Very few,
a lot.
right?
I mean, I found out even from the company, which is Mamaki, that even the new ones, they are very rare in this country.
Well, I think you had said when we initially talked to you that you like to do things that feed your soul.
Yeah.
And one of the things you talked about was you work with fine artists on different types of projects. Yes. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, one of the beauties of working with the digital printing is that we've been able to do work for conservation. That's been something that's really interesting, that the technology has been embraced by such an old school industry. We have done some really interesting projects with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The conservationist at the Met spoke at an international conference on conservation during COVID. And as a result, museums from all over the world have contacted us to do digital printing for conservation. The challenge has been we're not able to have the pieces in our hands. So
it's sight unseen. Yeah. Oh,
You have to work with measurements and.
we get
Do they give you maquettes or something?
No, we get scans of pieces. And here's the challenge. We are expected to replicate textiles so that they are pieced into garments and they're indetectable when our textile is pieced into the garment. It has to be absolutely indetectable, that it's replicated so perfectly that you can't tell that it is a fabric that is digitally printed.
So what kind of a project would be something that you would be piecing into?
So, for instance, it might be an 18th century gown that the collar has been so damaged that they have to replace the collar.
Okay.
That's something that we did for the Met.
Okay.
When I was approached to do that project, the Met is great because I can go back and forth with strike-offs. What happened was I went up to the Met and was tasked with replacing a collar. It was a woven fabric. And so we have a scan, we have photographs, and I will go back and forth with strike-offs. Now, I might take back and forth 50 strike-offs, 60 strike-offs.
And strike-offs are samples that you're
So
Swatches,
it's, we'll keep going back and forth. I'll look at a Pantone book, to initially look at the color samples and choose color standards.
But are these projects that are like primo that you're just sort of get obsessed about? You're like, you're so into it that you'll do anything. Like
absolutely. So I'm going back and forth and back and forth. And, it's looking at the minutia of like threads under a microscope, and we're going back and forth. It is a printed replica of something that was woven, and looking at it with conservation people.
So do you print the texture of the woven into it? Wow.
So what's the base fabric?
It's whatever we're trying to replicate, something that is as close to the original as possible.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So it's really interesting, and working with the conservator to determine what is that fabric, or what could it have been, what can it be now.
Right.
But one of the things that was really thrilling for me in terms of conservation is that we recently redid the skirt for the Degas dancer. I went to meet them in the conservation department, and they said, oh, okay, well, let's go upstairs. And that's incredibly unusual. And so I followed the conservator upstairs, Glenn Peterson, and we're walking through the galleries of the Met, and it's before the Met opened. And, the Met is, and it's just like you see, sort of in the movies, they're roped off with the velvet ropes, right? And so, you go through room and room, and they're, opening the velvet ropes, and we're going, and we get to the room where the Degas dancer is. He said, well, that's our next project. And I'm sort of looking around, and he said, it's the Degas dancer. And I sort of, gasped.
You clutched your pearls.
I thought, really? You know, like every little girl's dream, you know, and me not being a graceful dancer, you know, and being the art girl. I thought, really? You know, the Degas dancer? And he said, yes, because Degas actually never finished the dancer. He did a papier-mâché maquette, but he never finished it in bronze. There are several of them all over the world. His children actually chose to make it in bronze and finish it. The curators in the museums have the choice to finish it. So in this case, they were changing the skirt to make it more like the period and making it longer and making it more like the paintings.
Oh, I didn't know that there was different lengths in it.
It was shorter. So the one that was currently on display, it was shorter. It was
like more tutu-y.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
And it was sort of shredded and uneven, and they wanted it to be longer, more period-like, more like the paintings. So we dyed several colors of tarlatan, which is kind of a gauze. It's several layers of different colors. And then it was painted back into by the conservators. And we dyed all the tarlatan for it. So
Oh, that's so cool.
Is tarlatan the original tool?
Yes.
Oh, it is.
yeah,
Okay, that's
it was the original tool. So it was the same, you know. So so that was really
Oh my God,
fun.
I was
so
so
exciting.
excited when I saw
So that
it.
was kind of a great project, you know, and it's so high profile. And some of the other things are historical. In the case of the collar that we replaced, it was on display in an exhibition soon after we completed it. And when I went to the Met to see it, I actually had to look at my phone and see which collar that we replaced because it was the distance was from me to you.
Yeah.
About 4 feet.
And when I looked at it in the exhibition, I couldn't tell which collar was replaced. You know, one of the most rewarding parts of my career is, you know, coming from what I consider a fine art background, even though it was in fibers, you know, it was now working with fine artists. And I had the absolute dream life of being able to work with artist Louise Bourgeois.
How did that come about?
Well, I met her longtime assistant, Jerry Gorovoy, personally. And I knew Jerry for almost 10 years. You know, when you know someone personally,
That's worked with someone famous.
it's hard to sort of say like, oh gosh, you know, please.
Would you ever consider having a coffee?
You know, please hire me to do something, you know. And he one day asked me to consult on a project. And he said, would you please speak to someone that we're working with on a project for a fabric piece? And I said, you know, I jumped at the chance. Of course, you know, I'd be happy to. And it was a fabric book. The person was a silk screener. They also did some millinery work on the side and did silk screening work. This was a completely fabric book. She was having trouble replicating this book for edition. It was because all the fabrics were fabrics from Louise's archives of her history. So it was like her father's handkerchief, her pantyhose that she had turned into artwork. It was a piece of gingham that she had drawn on. So it was fabrics that this person was having trouble identifying. My job was to consult and determine what those fabrics were and how to source those fabrics. What I realized is that I really wanted to do the project. The person came to me and I started to answer the questions. Oh, that's a nylon tricot. Oh, that's a silk twill. Oh, and then I sort of started to be very reserved about my answers. And I didn't really want to answer the questions because I really wanted to do the project, or at least to be a larger part of the project.
Okay.
So you thought if you gave them all the answers, they wouldn't need you anymore.
Right. So I thought, no, I'm supposed to be consulting.
What do you think this one is?
Right. And so I said, I started to answer by saying, I could help you with that. Yes, I could identify that. Right. So I started to be a little cagey. What I did, which maybe wasn't so fair, is I have a photographic memory.
I don't know. I think I knew this about you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, being so visual, it's very strange. When I lose things, I visually think about where I've seen them, and that's how I find things. I realize that I have this photographic memory for things, that I can literally see things and remember things visually. I had replicated 2 pages from the book to show what was possible, just in case. A little taste of what was possible.
And amuse-bouche.
Yes, just in case. I spoke to my friend and I said, I just wanted to show you something. And the publisher of this book was Peter Bloom, and his gallery was just down the street in Soho. And he said, I'm going to go see Peter Bloom. Why don't we swing by the studio? And I said, that's great. That's fantastic. So he said, I would love for him to meet you anyway, and we'll swing by. So they came by, and I showed what I had printed. And it was 2 very simple pages out of the book. One was a gingham, black and white gingham, where she had filled in 2 of the boxes with a red Sharpie. And the other was a strapping, like a burlap strapping that was woven together. I had just taken, strapping that I had seen on the internet and just sort of wove it together the way that it was woven and mocked it up in Photoshop and printed it out. Both of those I printed on the fabric it was printed on in the book. When they came that next day, I had those 2 things to show. And they had obviously seen the book, and they said, well, how did you do that, number one? And I said, well, this was digitally printed. And, it's just something to show what's possible in replicating Louise's artwork digitally printed. I didn't know if they'd ever done that before. They were used to doing everything by silkscreen, and they were working with this silkscreen printer, and I didn't know if this was something that they had explored with anyone or that they were even thinking about going forward with this project. They were blown away. And they said, well, we think that you should do this project.
You're like, score!
Oh, really? That would be great. I would love the opportunity. Bottom line, we did most of the project. And in all fairness, the person that was originally doing the book did the silk screened pages of the book and did all the construction of the project.
How big is the book?
I don't recall. You're putting me on the spot, Mel.
I'm
not sure how many. No. I mean, it was, maybe 11 by 17, each page.
Yeah.
And it was a fabric book. And it was, constructed to be able to be taken apart.
Oh.
So that each page could be displayed individually. It was recently at her show at the MoMA. Mm-hmm. And so that opened up my history with Louise Bourgeois. And we did every fabric piece for Louise from that day forward until the day she passed.
Oh.
So that was an 11-year history.
And when was the first time that you met her?
Soon after that, and then it was just, she was so prolific. It was, she's somebody I had studied in school.
Yeah. Was she intimidating? Yeah. In her presence? Yeah.
No, she's, just because I just thought she was amazing, and she just only cared about the work. She was someone that was so strong of a woman artist and so undervalued, and really only gained success much later in her lifetime. Mm-hmm. And I think really is someone who is the biggest female sculptor of our history to this day. I mean, I think she's really somebody that was undervalued and now is really gaining so much respect.
Recently, you've done 2 shows. One, my husband Chris loves Severance.
Yes.
So what did you do for that?
Oh my gosh, we do so much dyeing for Severance. And, that's such a stylized show.
Do you remember what you dyed when you go home?
No, we don't. Absolutely not. No, you know that show is so great because it's so stylized. The palette is so specific. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of the garments we dye, a lot of the things for the sets we dye. We do Gilded Age, and that's so obvious with the printing and with dyeing.
Were you telling me that the timing for that, to have something designed, printed, and done in fabric, then it has to go right to a costume, to a tailor, fittings, and it's a tight...
Everything is super tight. Yeah.
Do you thrive on that?
I do love the adrenaline of sort of the last minute.
Right. Yeah, you talked about having a deadline that is, it actually pushes you to be more creative because you have this kind of thing. And I think we all feel that way.
I think I've only worked all night for one project, and it was Casino with Bob De Niro. Oh, okay. That was the only all-nighter that I've pulled for Dyenamix.
That's fitting for Casino.
Yes,
that
right?
is.
So yes. And it was because his shirt got stolen off the set. And I had to watch the dailies to replicate the shirt overnight so that they could, because they were on a shooting schedule.
And they had to sew it.
So it was a vintage shirt. We had to dye it. I had to silk screen it because it was pre-digital printing. I had to silk screen it. I had to send the fabric to LA. They had to make the shirt. The person in LA had to fly it to fly or drive or whatever they had to do, take it to Vegas so that they could film him in the shirt. That was the only time I had to work all night.
One of the questions we like to ask everybody is, what's the best advice you've ever gotten? And then in turn, what advice would you give to somebody else? The
best advice, or the advice that I got, is from my father. Growing up, my family were all business owners, actually. My father said to me, if you can't afford it, you can't have it. And this is coming from kind of old school. My father never had a credit card. And I always took that with me as, don't overextend yourself. Don't live beyond your means. Right. I think that's what kept me in business all these years. Yeah, don't live beyond your means.
Because, you need to do the work.
If you're not putting in the work, you'll be out of business. Put in the work.
Maybe that's the best advice you can give to somebody else.
Put in the work.
Yeah.
Because I still work like a beast. I work like a beast.
Yeah. We have to take a quick break.
Yeah,
we'll come back and do what's inspiring us this week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that cool? Yeah.
So Mel, what's inspiring you this week?
This week, I'm actually working on a project that I found on YouTube because I was too cheap to buy antique mirror. It's very expensive. I had a mirror that broke in a move, and I wanted to antique it myself. I priced it out. I'm like, no, I'm not paying that. Found something that was great. Went on YouTube, found this technique that I absolutely love, and I will post it on our website. And it's basically stripping the latex paint off of a mirror and then scraping it off. A little toxic, but it's fine. Use a citrus paint remover. And then the magic happens when you combine Clorox with water, and you can spray it on, and it eats away at the filament of it to what you want. And then that dries, and then you can paint any color on the back of it that you want. You can use a bronze, a copper, you could use black, and basically that idea of just customizing. And so I'm actually working on that project out of my house, and so I will post that. And it was just a YouTube find, but it's that resourcefulness of just like, I'm not going to pay that. I can do that.
Yeah.
And you, what are you doing?
Well, mine's a bit of a reminder to myself. I had a good friend who designs planters, and she gave me for my birthday last year a really beautiful copper garden trowel. And I'm pretty good about like investing in the right tools for the right things. But with gardening, it's not a newer thing for me, but it's also one of those things where I'm like, oh, I'll just get it, whatever trowel. And this trowel that she gave me, it's so much, it's a good reminder to me, and it's inspiring me to think about tools that I'm using all the time, because it makes a huge difference when I'm planting and gardening. I've bought so many crappy trowels that like you put them in the dirt and then they bend completely backwards, and this thing is great. It's comfortable. And for people, if they're interested, it's called the PKS Solid Copper Garden Trowel, and I'll put a link to it on the website.
And some designers do say, spend the most money on the things you touch every day, in your hardware, in your things like that. It
is a balance you have to find. But when you find a brand and it's harder when you don't know it's good, but somebody gave it to me and now I know it's good.
Yeah.
So now I'm willing to spend the money on the next thing that they make that might be.
I'll take it. Yeah. I'll take two.
You got to prove it to me a little bit.
Yeah.
Right.
And Raylene, how about you?
Well, of course, I'm obsessed with color. So I am completely inspired by the Proenza Schooler store in Soho, because it is this buttercream interior. I find myself buying all these accessories for my home in like butter.
Oh,
They like this creamy. I don't know if you've seen the store on Mercer Street.
It, yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen
Yes.
it is the most incredible.
It's the most flattering color too.
Oh.
When you walk by it or you're in it, it's like that. That 5 o'clock like magic light that you want to be photographed in.
It's creamy. Yeah, it is creamy. So I bought a tray. I'm like, I'm buying like all these things in that palette. So I'm like, clearly I'm obsessively influenced by it.
Do we all get that way about color? Like you sort of gravitate to it, and then you're like you
realize, oh, I have 10 of that. Not the same thing, but like you're like, oh, I think you do that.
Yeah, I had that with eggplant.
Yeah.
Like
Really?
the color eggplant. Yeah. Clearly, I don't think
I'm visually pointing to pillows in
this entire
color.
apartment. Raylene, thank you so much for being on.
This was so much fun. For our listeners, if you want to see more of Raylene's work, check out the show notes as well as our website, www.alifecreativepod.com, for additional information and links to her website and social media. And as always, thank you for tuning in to A Life Creative. If you'd enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please leave us a review and share it with a fellow creative. We'll see you in the next episode.
Our producer is Chris Kangas. Our theme music was composed by Pierce McIntyre. And a special thanks to all the amazing people at East 10th House Studio.